Welcome to Currently, a weekly news roundup featuring conversations about the top local stories from the past 7 days from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Christal Frost. Now, this podcast was recorded at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday, February 27th. Things may change by the time you're watching or listening. Currently is made possible by underwriting from our generous lead supporter, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. Home fashion elevated. Support also comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you're not just choosing a bank, you're choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community. Visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. And the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City, a super chill hangout boasting a full bar of 200 plus, rotating cans, drafts, shooters, and pinball machines in a low-key setting. Joining me in the studio today, as always, head writer of the Traverse City Ticker, Ms. Beth Milligan. Hello, Beth. How are you?
I'm doing great.
And we have a very, very special guest in studio today, a very talented reporter from UpNorthLive. Hello, Alli Baxter.
Hello, Christal. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Of course, the Ticker is a free multimedia daily news email and website. Be sure to subscribe at traverseticker.com. And UpNorthLive for 70 years, the Paul Bunyan Network has been bringing the broadcast news, weather, sports, entertainment right here to Northwest Michigan.
How fun is that? The Paul Bunyan Network.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Did you know that actually Midwestern Broadcasting founder Les Biederman also bought WPBN, the Paul Bunyan Network, and then, there was some federal thing that said you can't have radio and television.
Oh,
so had to sell.
Good Biederman influence, though.
Hey, that's directly from the book Happy Days, by the way, old school book about Les Biederman. And now we're back.
Okay.
Well, Alli, so you have been here for about 4 years now, is that right?
That's right. 4 years in beautiful northern Michigan.
Beautiful northern Michigan, but where is home for you?
Virginia.
Virginia.
A little bit of a long way away. And I had never been to Michigan before.
Really?
The day I moved here.
So, that's a big step, Virginia to Michigan, huh?
A lot more snow up here. In Virginia, it's very much a thing. They don't let us go outside if any snow touches the ground. But here, that was an adjustment that you still get in the car and you go about your day.
You're like, wait, I have to drive? But it's snowing.
Yeah, I'm a little desensitized now. My mom still is not. She sees the different videos that we put out there and she said, I just can't do that. She said, I'll come visit you in the summer.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. So 4 years here, we can call you almost a local, I would say, because Beth and I are both from here, right, Beth?
Grew up here. Born in Alpena. Shout out to Alpena, but grew up in Traverse City.
Oh, I forgot you were born in Alpena.
Yeah, other side of the lake.
There you go. You were in the Sunrise side. I like it. But yeah, I think because you cover the local news, you're definitely a local.
Okay, so we're almost, is it like 5 years? Is that when you're...
Yeah. We usually say 5.
Traverse City might say like 50, but we'll say 5 for the purposes of the show.
That's a very, very good point. Well, we love that you're here, and thank you so much for joining us in studio today. We're going to start things off with a story, Alli, that you covered about marijuana tax dollars returning to northern Michigan communities. And I know, Beth and I, back in the day, we were covering all of the pot money, right? We were covering this idea that marijuana was legalized, and then we were talking quite a bit about what could happen with some of those the tax dollars and how that could really influence and support communities. So you ran a story back a few days ago about $100 million in marijuana tax dollars collected and then being dispersed to the communities across the state, and a lot of those communities are right here in northern Michigan. These are fairly unrestricted dollars, which is always nice for government, right?
Right.
It's like someone just giving you money and saying, hey, go have fun.
Use it however you want to.
Kind of love that. So they have a lot of freedom to use the funds as they please. And your last story about this was talking about 2 specific northern Michigan towns where marijuana could be maybe a part of the solution for some significant water issues. So can you tell us a little bit more about those 2 towns and what the water issues are that they're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best part about these marijuana tax dollars is they are so unrestricted. But in that, there's also so many things you can do that I almost feel like some places get overwhelmed of.
Right.
What are we going to use this for? So my focus with this story was, well, let's return to 2 areas that are experiencing certain water-related issues. In Cadillac, it's PFAS. And Central Lake, they have a really aging water system. So we wanted to go back to those communities and say, hey, now that you have even just what seems like a pretty smaller amount of funds coming your way, how are you going to use that? Can you put that towards your water-related issues?
Yeah, and when you say about the actual amount of funds, Beth, your sister publication, the Leelanau Ticker, also wrote a story about this too, and it's something like $58,200 per retail store within the community. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, they take the 854 active licenses that are in the state. They have funding from each of those, and then they divide them up by county and then city, village, and township based on every dispensary operating within their borders.
Okay.
So just like Alli's talking about, with smaller towns like Cadillac, in the Leelanau Ticker, we were talking about Northport. For a small town, if you've got one even dispensary or two within your borders, you can get a significant, bump back in revenue that can really help with some of these projects that may be, like, for example, in Alli's story, lead pipes or unfunded mandates from the state to upgrade water supplies that the town isn't quite sure where they're going to get the funding from.
Now, Alli, you spoke to Michelle Fox for this story, and she is a village council member. But obviously, when you have a small village, you're also a business owner and a community member. I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats. And she, said that this $58,000 it's like $1 million for their small town, really.
It is, especially in that village where, like Beth was saying, there's not a lot of funding, especially coming from the federal level, to support this mandate to replace this aging water system.
Right.
And she said even though it's this small amount, $58,000, maybe that's one lead gooseneck, we don't really know. She said it actually can go a lot further because a lot of times when we're applying for grant money to help fix our aging water system, we as a village also have to put up a contribution as well. So if we can put up this much, then we can get double the amount back.
Oh, it's really fantastic. And it's so funny to me because, again, early coverage of this, even back in the day when you had, villages and towns and cities that were even considering whether or not they wanted to have dispensaries and have retail locations within their, jurisdiction. And it feels like you're starting to see some of the payoff from that now.
Yeah, I mean, and when you scale up, for example, Grand Traverse County is going to pocket over $931,000 this year. The city of Traverse City is going to get close to $757,000. So that, in a larger scale for the larger community is a lot. And then you see some really in-depth discussions, like, for example, at Grand Traverse County at the commission level, they're having all kinds of conversations. They've used some of the money already for everything from Camp Graylick to psychiatry services for the community to housing support. So, when you start getting close to $1 million in revenue annually, that can really also make a difference, obviously.
Yeah, it's huge. So as far as the PFAS story, though, I mean, obviously, I know PFAS has been an issue in many, many local communities. What is Cadillac planning to do then, maybe with some of this marijuana reimbursement money?
So at the city level, they are still not sure because there are so many possibilities. They're right there, well, can we even put this towards some PFAS-related things? If you talk to the Cadillac Advocates for Clean Water there, they said, we need more support from the city. And if you guys are getting this extra $100,000, we would like support because right now we're footing the bill for a lot of PFAS testing for people's wells. Mm-hmm. We're also footing the bill for getting people clean water. A lot of people are having to go out and buy packs of water that they said we would really like some help from the city in supplementing that if we can't connect to their water or we already are connected to their water.
All right. Well, I mean, it's nice to see. Like, it's just nice to see after so many years, some of this funding coming back, some of these good projects it can be used for. And then now you can actually have communities that are starting to maybe bank on getting some of this funding year after year and maybe have loftier goals at some point, right? Now, we're going to move over to a story that you did, a few stories you did this week, Beth. Specifically, housing projects were back on the City of Traverse City agenda this week. And we're going to talk about 2 HomeStretch projects that are meant to bring workforce housing. You also covered progress on 2 other downtown projects, Fish Pass and and the Rotary Square. Thank you so much. I want to call it the Piazza, but the Rotary Square. So let's start with housing and tell me about those two HomeStretch projects, what that could mean for workforce housing.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the result of a proactive effort by the city of Traverse City to find and partner with housing developers on city property. And one of these, Lot O, which is the parking lot on the corner of Cass and State Street in downtown Traverse City next to the omelet shop.
Thank you.
That parking lot there, that might help people reference it. The city, these parking lots that it has, the city has had a strategy of feeling like surface parking is not the highest and best use for downtown land, which is rare and very expensive. They've been trying to consolidate more parking into the parking garages and then using those surface lots for redevelopment. So Lot O is an example of that. HomeStretch has a purchase agreement for that site right now for $470,000. They have through this year, though they'll probably be given an extension in May for another year to sort of line up the funding for this housing project. And the idea is this building would have 44 units in it. They would be targeted towards roughly the average of tenant would have 60% of the area and median income, so below market rate units. And then the ground floor would have a local food curator. They've been kind of comparing it to Trader Joe's.
Oh.
Like someone who has fresh produce, a food market, but with a focus on local Michigan source projects. So this would be a local partner that they're working with. They haven't named them yet. But the idea is they'd be eliminating this food desert that's in downtown Traverse City.
Yeah.
Max Bauer's moved off of Union Street. So we don't really have, you have some like Fogarelli's and Burritt's further down on the outside of downtown, but right in the heart of downtown, there's not really any kind of grocery store. Mm-hmm. So this would address that. They are working right now to line up a bunch of funding through the state. So if they can do that this year, their hope is to start construction next year in 2026 with the goal of being open in 2028. The one main challenge with the construction of this building will be the city, when they approve this contract, put a clause in there that there has to be a tunnel maintained through the building so that if you're on State Street, you can go through that tunnel and get into the back parking area of like the omelet shop and My Secret Stash, some of those businesses next door, because the businesses were very worried that that building was going to block essentially customer access to their rear parking spaces. So that will be a little bit of a challenge when they're constructing it to keep that tunnel going with construction happening above and cars going underneath. But that is the way that the deal is structured. So they just have to figure out how to navigate that.
Tunnels.
Yeah.
That's legit.
Yeah, so that's one project. The other project is in a similar vein. The city put out a request for proposals in November for property that they have over on Breitner and Woodmere. There are these two parcels that are next to each other. It's where the city's Department of Public Works is over there. Our public services. So the city garage, essentially right across from the library on Woodmere.
Okay.
So HomeStretch put in a bid for this project. They estimate it's about a $4.6 million project. It would bring 18 residential units to the site. Again, a mix of incomes below market rate and a partnership with Goodwill that would establish some of the units for permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
So individuals experiencing homelessness, which I'm sure Alli has covered too, is a major issue in the community. So that project is going to be a little tricky too. It's very close to railroad tracks. So they're going to have to do some soundproofing of the units, which was something that the city said they wanted to see in a proposal. There's also 24/7 operations in the garage next door with snow storage and trucks coming in and out, so sound is really important there. But HomeStretch is working on, again, securing some funding for that and hoping that that project maybe could also break ground in next year into 2027 with a 2027 opening.
Yeah, very cool. We talked about housing again last week too. Obviously it's a very important issue. It's affecting many, many communities across northern Michigan. And it's again nice to see that there are some folks that are really trying to at least partially solve some of the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. I want to talk about Fish Pass. And I have to tell you, I was telling you guys, before we started recording the show, that I'm a little bit obsessed with Fish Pass right now. I feel like it's a video game for fish where they have to go through all these different things. And Beth, you were telling me a little bit about like facial recognition, which I immediately called fishal recognition.
That's a very strong pun. I'm for that pun.
I'm obsessed with this. Tell us first about Fish Pass, what this actually means, and what are some of those sort of gaming levels that the fish have to go through before they can get, through through to the waters.
Yes, it's gaming with very high stakes, which is trying to keep invasive species out of our watersheds, especially the sea lamprey, which has been very destructive to many species in the Great Lakes. This project, the construction has been going on since May of last year on Fish Pass, which is at the Union Street Dam site in downtown Traverse City off Union Street, a $23.3 million project. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which is a partner in the project, appeared before city commissioners this week to give an update on what is happening with that. They are working on phase 1 and 2 right now, which is essentially taking out the existing dam, building a new labyrinth weir and dam, and installing, there will be a natural bypass channel. So what that will look like is the upper parts of the Bourbon where the dams have been taken out already, how the kind of natural flow of the river is there. There will be part of that. And then the other part of the river will have a fish sorting channel, which is about a 400-foot long, 30-foot wide flume. And this is where your video game comes in.
Yeah.
So the idea is, and the whole reason Fish Pass is being built is a research project that can be replicated at other sites, hopefully sites across the country or even internationally. There will be different technologies in this flume that allow fish to pass through or not. So you mentioned like video recognition of a different species of fish, but there are also things like lights and bubbles and sound and, holes that some bigger fish can go through, but maybe not smaller or the other way around, leaping barriers. These are all different technologies that different fish either are attracted to or move away from. The idea being that we want to pass fish into the Boardman-Ottaway River that we want and keep species like sea lamprey, particularly, that we don't want out of the watershed.
Yeah. And so what happens when they don't pass? I mean, is there like a trap door?
Yes, ideally. So the unwanted species will be trapped. It can be culled or removed from the river and not allowed to pass further up.
And destroyed, likely.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, probably, especially with the case of the sea lamprey because they're so destructive. So the construction has been on schedule, which has been great. Even with some heavy snow days this winter, they've been able to make up work on other days. These first 2 phases, which is basically all the in-water activity, will be done by 2026. And then phase 3 is everything essentially upland. So that would be our parks, our sidewalks, stormwater management, electrical work, new access points to the river. All of that will happen once the in-water work is done. And the idea is that the entire site will be up and running by early 2027. And that's really when the research can begin in partnership with the tribe, the DNR, and the Fishery Commission.
I mean, it's an incredible project. And honestly, I'm hopeful that this can be replicated because, obviously we're not the only area in the world that is dealing with invasive species. And it has been truly destructive for our Great Lakes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think an important thing to know about this project, and this is part of the reason it was on the agenda this week, is we've obviously seen a lot of federal funding freezes with grants, infrastructure projects under the current administration. So I think there was some concern about a major project that's underway that obviously is on a sensitive part of our river, if that funding was going to be jeopardized or affected at all. According to the Fishery Commission, no. The funding has been committed. Construction is already underway. And even for the next phase, which is, again, all that park work around the dam, there is already, funding in place that's probably going to be $7 to $8 million. So at least from the Fishery Commission's perspective, that funding is secured and committed to the project.
Very cool. So very close to Fish Pass is the Rotary Square, which is a piazza of sorts in the middle of downtown. Can you give us a little history of Rotary Square and, how it's currently being used, what maybe it could be used for in the future, and how it really relates to Fish Pass to a certain degree?
Yeah. So, I mean, they're separate projects, but obviously their close proximity means that there's opportunities to maybe for the city and the Downtown Development Authority to work together to have sort of a natural flow. If you're a pedestrian walking downtown in a couple of years, you're going to see this incredible kind of Fish Pass project and then hopefully some a nice piazza or a square next door that you can have a nice break or a coffee or whatever. So Rotary Square is owned by the DDA, and they are in the process right now of creating a public vision for what that site is going to become. It has long been a DDA plan to have this kind of public square downtown. You could imagine things that might happen there. The discussion has been everything from maybe the future location of the farmers market to the Christmas tree that we now put in the middle of a busy intersection for reasons that not everyone understands. I love it. Some people find it very dangerous.
I love it too, but yeah.
So maybe we move the Christmas tree over there. Maybe there's an ice skating rink. Maybe there's concerts in the park. In fact, we've already seen the Traverse City Philharmonic doing summer concerts there to kind of show the public what it can be. We've had the Michigan State versus University of Michigan football games there, movies in the park.
There's a bunch of ice cream there one day. I was just walking by and I was like, what? Ice cream free? I'm here.
So if you're interested in sharing ideas for what you'd like to see that space become, today we're taping on Thursday. So when this airs on Friday, the DDA last night, Thursday night, will have held an open house at the City Opera House. But there's more to come.
Oh,
so
good.
It's not your only chance to weigh in. All of this spring, they're going to be hosting multiple community pop-ups. There's an online survey if you go to downtowntc.com, which is the website of the downtown. You can find more info on Rotary Square. But the idea is by June, they'll be gathering all these ideas for the next several months, and then they'll have a conceptual design plan. We only have a few years left in the TIF 97 fund, which is one of the main funding sources for downtown projects.
Right.
And so this Rotary Square has been identified as a top priority for the DDA for possible improvements with that remaining funding in TIF 97.
Yeah, very cool. I feel like it's going to be, I love what Rotary Square has already been doing. So if they have more of a solidified, long-term plan for it, great. And if it happens to, sort of align with this Fish Pass project, which if you're ever looking for me at any point in my life, I'm going to be at Fish Pass. I'm just telling you right now, just watching what is happening. I'm obsessed with it. I think it's a fantastic, fantastic project. Thank you so much for reporting on it.
Yeah.
So coming up, the city is revisiting some safety concerns on West Front Street, and UpNorthLive has a brand new podcast that debriefs some of Northern Michigan's most powerful and, quite frankly, impactful cases. That's more to come on Currently, but first, a word for our lead supporter, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings. To me, the kitchen table is kind of like the family conference room table, right? It's the boardroom table. It's where you have your most important meetings. It's where you come to your really, really important decisions. Your dining room is where the family gathers for monthly Monopoly, maybe daily Monopoly if you're like my family was. And it's where you have your meatloaf. It's where you help the kids with their homework and you surprise yourself about how much algebra you remember. Now, with all of this important stuff happening in the dining room and in the kitchen, be sure that your table and chairs are up for the challenge. At Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, you have so many options to find exactly what you're looking for you and your family, and the many discussions, decisions, and game nights to come. Choose the right size. Choose the right shape, the color, the finish, and find the perfect dining room at Golden Fowler Home Furnishings on Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. It's home fashion, elevated. All right, welcome back to Currently. We're going to move on to a story, Beth, that you covered yesterday that details some rather significant safety concerns on West Front Street. This is not a new concern. These are things that have been in the news before, and actually the City Commission even voted on some of this last year. What is happening with West Front Street? Why is it deemed a little unsafe?
Yeah. So we're talking about a very particular stretch of West Front Street, which is basically 500 feet between Madison Street and the western city limits. This is where West Front, if you're, heading west out of town, it takes a curve there. And and so even if, if you're going in that stretch, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. People tend to accelerate.
Click on it.
Yeah, either coming into town or going out of town in that stretch. And in fact, just in, a 5-year period between 2019 and 2023, there were 9 reported crashes there. Most of those at night, not involving drugs or alcohol, and involving people running off the road. The most serious was in December 2023. There was an eastbound vehicle that went off Front Street, smashed into the backyard of one of the homes there on the curve, and caused considerable damage. Thankfully, there weren't any major injuries, but either the people in the car or obviously the people in the home, that could be an example of what could be a fatal, a very serious situation. So that homeowner has actually been advocating on behalf of other houses in that stretch for some safety improvements. Last year, the city hired an engineering firm, Hubble, Roth & Clark, to study that stretch. That firm came back in August to the City Commission and presented some recommended safety improvements. So we're talking about things like signage, pavement markings, essentially things that would help drivers be more aware that there's a curve coming up.
Yeah.
and also a guardrail. That vote last summer to make those improvements, to fund them, failed. It needed 5 votes. It got 4. Part of the debate at the commission was some commissioners felt that they wanted to maybe, for example, right now there's a median in the road that has some heavy planters in it as a sort of traffic calming measure there. They thought maybe can we add or extend more planters as a barrier. Commissioner Tim Werner in particular did not like the idea of guardrail, which he felt was more appropriate for a highway instead of a city street that has a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. So they didn't get the votes then, but it has come back. And there was a discussion this week at the City Commission. Next Monday, because they were in study session this week, they can't vote on issues. But next Monday, they're expected to vote on these improvements. This time around, the engineers came back and said, just so you know, the planters that are in the middle of the road, they're not secured. They're very heavy, but they're not like embedded in the pavement.
Right.
They're just sitting on top of the pavement. They are not crash tested. They're not up to federal safety standards. So not only will, in the view of the engineering firm, not only are they not positioned well to stop cars from going off the road, they may be hazards themselves. If a car hit one of these planters, the planter might itself fly into one of the houses or cause debris that would go over the roadway.
Or hit another car.
Or hit a passenger or a pedestrian or another car. So they are recommending taking out the planters from the middle of the road, installing that guardrail on the corner, and making some of those signage and pavement improvements.
So was the idea with the planters, like if you see planters, you're going to slow down?
Yes.
Was that?
Yeah, and we've seen this in other sections of the city as well as on the highways. When you like Division Street, for example, is a great one that's been reconstructed in recent years. When you have those medians in the middle of the roads, it does visually narrow the corridor. So drivers do tend to slow down when they see narrow stretches versus an open stretch that makes them feel like they're on a racetrack and they can go fast. There was only 4 commissioners at this week's meeting. There are 7 commissioners total. So it'll be interesting to see how the discussion goes next week. Commissioner Werner still seems very opposed to the idea of guardrail. However, I think other commissioners did express concerns about the safety of that corridor. The city attorney also pointed out that now, especially that there are recommendations on the record from an engineering firm that you should make some safety improvements, that the city could be liable potentially in a lawsuit in the future if they don't address this now that these recommendations have been made.
Right. Well, thank you for covering that, and we'll look to see what happens at that meeting. I mean, nobody likes a guardrail. It's not like the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could paint it, which is something the city staff discussed, is maybe we can make it look a little better.
you could do like a painting project on it, and maybe you could paint planters on it, right?
It's like the request for murals around.
Maybe something with the Arts Commission,
Guardrail murals. I love that. For our final story today, Alli, you have some very exciting news to report. And it's a brand new podcast that UpNorthLive and yourself are launching that dives into some of the biggest cases in northern Michigan. So what's it called? How can we listen? Tell us more.
So it's called Closed Cases.
Love it.
And we talk a lot about a lot of our unsolved cases in the area. We talk a lot about ongoing cases that are happening that are either still being investigated or still going through the court system. And a lot of times, investigators, detectives, they can't tell us a lot about what's going on.
No.
Because it's still going through that justice process, right? So our goal with this was to go back and not just necessarily in the last year or 5 years, but go back as far as we can and talk about the most impactful, powerful cases that people here in northern Michigan know about. I know, I'm not from northern Michigan, but you guys are. And so I think both of you can recall certain cases that have really stuck with you over time and had thoughts about what was going on behind the scenes there. And so that was our goal. We started with Grand Traverse County Sheriff Mike Shea and asking him, what are the most impactful cases while you've been here at the sheriff's office?
So you have your first episode out already?
We have a promotion for it. We went ahead and did a story showing a part of our conversation where Sheriff Shea broke down one of the most impactful cases for him. It was almost 10 years ago now. It was a shooting in Long Lake Township that really ended up being a cross-country investigation because this had started with a homicide out in Las Vegas.
Wow. Oh, I remember this. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, that'll be a lot of fun to listen to. Not fun, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, just to know what was going on behind the scenes. Yeah. At the time, Sheriff Shea was a detective, so he spoke to the family and, wanted to know what was going through their minds. This was a really awful situation where ultimately the father was forced to shoot his own daughter to be able to protect his family and her kids. And I don't think any of us could even imagine what it's like to be in that position. And that was what Sheriff Shea and I revisited and talked about. He said, that case is going to go with me to my grave. I will not forget it.
So we're really going to hear from the investigators, from the law enforcement officials, from prosecutors about the stories that really impacted them personally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The sky's the limit. I definitely don't want to have like any restrictions on this podcast. I know coming up, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to talk to, going back to Grand Traverse County, talk to Detective Captain Chris Clark about the Linda Mateer case, which actually at the time of our recording with Sheriff Shea, he had given us this inkling, hey, by the way, one of our biggest unsolved cases, it may be coming to fruition. It may be coming to a close soon. So it was interesting to have that heads up a couple of weeks ago and seeing now what is transpiring.
Right. And that led to, I mean, that was a cold case that now you have a prime suspect that has been arrested. So yeah, fantastic stuff there. I feel like that's a really good point because, you know, I think as journalists, you know, it's always the breaking story, right? And then, you can't really get a lot of details in an ongoing investigation. Then we wait for whether it's the trial or whatever that's going to happen, and you see some details come out, and then it's sentencing and we're done. And yet, you know, for the people who are, you know, deeply, deeply inside of those stories, the case is not closed, right? It's always kind of there.
Yeah, and especially in these small northern Michigan communities, this stuff really stays with people.
Yeah.
And I think it really has a lot of questions down the road of what was going on in that investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's usually maybe missing is just like all that behind the scenes investigative legwork that authorities do to bring a case like that to a close.
Yeah, you know, I know I've spoken to many people, and specifically in law enforcement, who think it's not, you know, they want people to know it's not like it's on TV, right? Yeah. You don't wrap up a case in, you know, 28 minutes or whatever it is, like in a half hour, you know, TV program. It takes years sometimes to really break things down.
Even in this recent case with the arrest of a suspect in the Linda Mateer case, I just recently asked Detective Captain Clark, what is your role now? What are you doing now? And he said, oh, we don't stop. We're still investigating. We're still interviewing. We're still looking for evidence. Our job is still not even done just because there has been an arrest of a suspect.
Right. Yeah, and you have to go through due process as a suspect. So, yeah, I mean, great point. And how can people, I mean, just go to UpNorthLive.com and you'll be putting it out there at some point?
Yeah, we'll be working to get it on as many platforms as possible. Right now, just doing some tweaks and refining it, making sure that audio is nice, crisp, and clear.
You know how that.
Getting it on, it'll be on all those platforms, Spotify, Apple.
Yeah. So wherever you get your podcasts, you can look for Closed Cases?
Closed Cases, yes.
Closed Cases, Alli Baxter, Up North Live. At the end of the podcast, can I just suggest, can you just go case closed and look directly into the camera?
You should have like a file folder as well. So there's like that little gnat sound effect.
You'll just
close.
Flip it over.
Graphic.
And now, case closed. Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I'm always interested in local stories, clearly. That's why we do this podcast. And we're also very interested in you know, things that really have an effect on, you know, the media here in Northwest Michigan. So I want to say thank you again to our guest journalists, Beth Milligan, head writer for the Traverse City Ticker, Alli Baxter, reporter for Up North Live. Before we go, I do have to ask you, what's one big thing that you're looking forward to next week, Beth?
Well, I'm going to give a quick plug for two because they're on the same day and because you're wearing a Bells and Chimes shirt today, which I love. So you and I have both been in a group called Bells and Chimes, which is at the Coin Slot. It's focused on women and non-binary people getting together to play pinball. It's super welcoming, super fun. So there's a tournament this Sunday. You can always come anytime. If you're brand new to pinball, we'll teach you how to play.
Yeah.
It's at 6 o'clock at the
We're
Coin
nice
Slot.
too.
We're nice, and it's really just a way to meet a lot of people from diverse backgrounds. Later that night is the Oscars. And you know how I feel about the Oscars.
I do know how you feel. Quick story. I had the lovely, lovely privilege of attending an Oscar party with you, a viewing party. And the television was not working. There were some
I'm not
things
going to
that
say it
were
was my
said,
best moment. It wasn't my best moment.
but we figured it out.
We did. I love Oscars. I win Oscar contests often. I'm just a huge movie fan in general. And Conan O'Brien is hosting this year, and I love him as well. So I think it'll be fun.
Fun plug. I love that. Alli, anything you're looking forward to this weekend or next week?
I think just more sunshine. Any day that I look ahead and it's like above 40 degrees, I'm like, oh, it's going to be a great day, especially when as journalists we're bopping around everywhere all day. It's just nice to have that drive be nice and relaxing and have like the sun warming your face.
Okay, you're officially a local now because when you're just like, end of February and you're like, I just want more sunshine. I'm like, yay.
I'm kind of done with the snow. I think we can move on.
Yeah.
You are back. I love it. Well, as for me, I'm super excited too about Bells with Bells and Chimes. Always love that. It's every other Sunday, and you can find more about Bells and maybe just getting a little bit more into pinball in general. Just follow them, Bells and Chimes, on Instagram. So Bells and Chimes TC for that. Yes, again, thank you both so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you. I have to say, too, that next week we're going to have a very special guest, journalist Art Bukowski. He's going to be talking about the Traverse City business news. Love Art. I'm very excited to have him on the show. And be sure to subscribe to the show on all platforms at crystalfrost.com. You can follow us on social media. You can subscribe to Currently with Crystal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch the full show on YouTube and on Facebook. Now, big thanks to our lead supporter, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City, home fashion elevated. Support also comes, of course, from West Shore Bank. And don't forget, when you choose West Shore Bank, it's not just a bank, it's a community partner. You can find them on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. And, of course, the coin slot, friends. And Alli, speaking of the coin slot, how do you feel about a little pinball? You told me you've never played.
I've never played, so I'm totally open to
This will be
doing
fun.
this for the first time.
All right, going to get a little nudging in, maybe a little slapping, maybe a bit of light tilting.
Light tilting is good on
I
a
want
Thursday or Friday.
I need the next T-shirt to say light tilting allowed. Like just a little bit. All right, Alli Baxter, what is the most absurd breaking news headline that someone could run about your life?
Probably Traverse City woman stranded on river.
Just on river?
On river.
All right, Beth, if your career in journalism had a clickbait headline, what would it be?
Local journalist writes 80% of her stories in her pajamas. I work from home.
I love that.